Hello. Read it here. Today we're going to read a story from our /Entitle Parents. Now, for our first story. How I started a revolution in my entitled family. All I wanted was my sisters. I am currently in custody of my two little sisters, Amy, who is 17, and Liza, who is 8. Not their real names for obvious reasons. I'm a 29 male, and we live in Australia. I am Potato, as that's what Liza calls me. And this is basically the story of how my family felt they were entitled to both of my sisters' bodies, and I wouldn't stand for that. I would like to warn anyone who has faced abuse in the past, as parts of their story may trigger some people. And to anyone who has faced abuse in the past, I do feel deeply sorry for you. The main part of the story takes place about a year ago. I moved out 6 years ago at the time and moved to another state for work and study. I was honestly really slack with keeping contact with my family, which is probably why this went on so long. When I do think back to the time before I moved out, I didn't treat Amy the best, and if I hadn't moved out and had so little contact with my family, I may have turned out just as entitled and as much of a horrible person. I came back to visit for a grandparent's birthday. After spending so long away, I spent the morning catching up with aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents of course, and Liza. Now, this was actually the first time I'd really realized the oddities of my family. Perhaps it was the change in environment. A few of my roommates had little sisters and whatnot after all, but it was the first time I noticed how quiet the little girls in my family were. I guess I'd always just thought of Amy as shy and quiet, but my little cousins were so much the same, polite, shy, quiet, and obedient. Though at the time I brushed this off. After a few hours, I realized that Amy was nowhere to be seen all day. The party was at my parents' house, so this confused me, and I slipped inside to see if she was cooped up in her room like a lot of 16 years old would be, talking to friends or doing assessments. What I found is a memory that will haunt me forever. My oldest uncle on my father's side, laying over my sister who was quite clearly in a lot of pain and struggling not to cry as he pinned her beneath him. I completely lost it as any brother would, shouting at him to get off her and out of her room. I scared the hell out of both of them, but in that moment, I was honestly ready to kill my uncle. Amy was pretty messed up in the head when I tried consoling her. She was covered in scares, had a rash that I later found out was an allergic reaction. She was allergic to strawberries. She didn't speak and looked at me as if she expected for me to hurt her too. Her room was dimly lit. The blinds taped closed to her wall. All the things she'd had when I left were gone, leaving her bedroom feeling cold and empty, and to add insult to injury, she was a month pregnant. When I demanded an explanation from my parents, they, paraphrasing, said that it was my uncle's right, and my father simply pointed out one of my 11 years old cousins sitting quietly with her parents and told me to have fun. I stormed off back to Amy's room, quietly packed her a bag of necessities, and managed to sneak her out of the house and into my car before doing the same with Liza. Part of me wanted to get all my cousins out too, but my main focus was of Amy right now, who sat trembling in the back of my car. I drove them both to the closest police station to report what was happening. I'll skip most of the details of the legal battle that ensued, but my family did not take kindly to being outed for what they were doing. It was a tradition that spanned generations, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with tradition. Amy and Liza were put into temporary foster care. Amy was wrecked. To her, everyone could and would hurt her, and I got reports every few hours that she was having a panic attack. 3 of my uncles went to jail for a very long time. I got a fair bit of money out of a range of family members. Full custody of both Amy and Liza. No enforced visitation to their parents. My parents had to pay for any therapy costs, medication, and medical needs for both of them. My family was torn in two by this. Many of my aunts leaving their husbands with their children after finally having the courage to follow me. Uncles who had married into the family took their wives, who had also been abused, and cut off ties. I still keep in contact with these members of my family, and I'm grateful for their support and glad that my cousins are safer now. Even some of the older guys who had been brought up thinking it was okay to treat women that way took themselves into counseling once they realized just how messed up it was. And I've had more than one instance where they admitted to hurting Amy and apologized, which I've accepted, as these cousins did their best to take their siblings or other cousins out of harmful environments. Now, I do believe some part of the ruling protected the younger men of the family, provided they see some form of mental health professional, as they grew up thinking that this was all normal so they didn't end up in jail, but did end up on some list of possible sex offenders. Not entirely sure there. No one is sure who fathered Amy's child, but she had her pregnancy terminated as we were told her physical and mental health would not cope with carrying a baby she ultimately would unlikely care for. She did consent at the time, and it was brought up by her psychologist once she was doing better, and she confirmed that she would have no love for the baby due to the circumstances which she felt pregnant. For 6 years, Amy had been physically, sexually, mentally, and emotionally abused in every way conceivable. This mostly came from my father's 4 brothers and brother-in-law who married into the family. My parents both stood by and let this happen, offering no support for Amy. During the case, my uncles argued it was their birthright being born into their family, and it was simply Amy's rite of passage before she was married off to one of my uncle's mates at 18. They used her allergy as a form of torture and manipulation. Wanting her to be silent and obedient, they would press strawberries against her skin anytime she said a word and force her to eat them when she stepped too far out of line. A lot of my aunts from my father's side admitted to enduring this treatment too, although most of them were lucky and didn't have allergies to exploit. I honestly can't even begin to explain everything that was wrong with Amy because of their behavior. Liza, for the most part, was okay. She needed a little therapy as she was being groomed into compliance and taught that what she would experience was normal, but Amy had completely shut down. It took 2 months before I could even get her speaking. She trusts me now, and we often sit down, and I let her talk and open up about whatever she feels comfortable to. Her stories often have me struggling to hold back tears while I comfort her. I did get Amy a service dog a few months ago, tailored towards the emotional support she needs on a regular basis. Lick ID Split honestly is the goodest of good doggos. She knows exactly when she's needed and is a massive help when it comes to calming Amy's anxiety, especially in public. We've had more than one encounter with unrelated entitled parents thinking they or their kid deserves her dog more than her. Let me know if you want these stories published too, because I've seen people like to read about service dog related incidents. But anyone who does think that can honestly fight me, no one deserves her dog more than her. On one occasion, one of my aunts, her husband went to jail, tried taking Lick ID Split because their money paid for her. I told her if she ever comes near my property again, I would call the police as there was a restraining order against her towards both my sisters. Later, she came back and tried to poison Lick ID Split with tainted meat, but one of my lovely neighbors caught her and chased her off. Police were called. She is now in jail too after having to pay a fine and some money to me because at this point, I'm pretty well acquainted in the legal system and sued her. My family still tried to get my sisters out of my care, reporting me for everything from animal abuse to drug trafficking. They planted drugs in an identical stuffed toy to Amy's comfort toy I left in the yard, but Amy would never do that, so I knew something was up immediately. Home security systems work wonders. I've actually become pretty chummy with the local police officers who have to inspect their claims, but they know I'd never do anything to endanger my custody over the girls. They mean the world to me. I will admit, though, I have done things to hurt me bond with them, yelling when stressed and throwing things from time to time, but I'm not perfect, and Amy has told me that although these moments do scare her, she doesn't feel endangered being near me when they happen. I also spoil them a little when they do happen. Now, the reason this ended on Am I the Asshole is because a few weeks ago my mother contacted me saying she wanted to talk. I was hesitant but agreed, and we met up in the next town over. No way I could be followed home. My mother explained how she was in the process of divorcing my father, and she wanted to have a relationship with me and my sisters, with emphasis on mending her bond with Amy, who had not called her mom in years. She explained how she was pressured into the marriage after she gotten pregnant with me and never wanted that life for her daughters. I flat out told her no, something several members of my family disagreed with, as she could have done literally anything to support Amy emotionally with what was happening, done anything to make her feel better or more secure with what was happening to her. But instead she was shunned and isolated except for when she was needed to cook, clean, or provide some sort of service to the family. Even going as far as to berate her whenever she did try to confide in my mom that she was in pain or scared. Amy was well past her breaking point when I took her and had even planned on killing herself less than a week after my visit. My mother argued that she had the same right as the other members of my family who had left and had contact with my sisters, but I told her it was because they were doing it to protect their children and themselves. They didn't wait a year after losing custody to try and fight for them. And I really don't even need to give a reason. I have custody, and she does not. Members of Am I the Asshole convinced me that when Amy is in a better place mentally and Liza is older, I bring it up with them, leave the decision in their hands. I've been told Amy will be a dependent well after she turns 18. Her mind just doesn't function properly, so there is no risk of her mother getting into contact behind my back, even when she's an adult. And while Amy does have a phone and a computer, she doesn't have any social media, as she doesn't want any chance of her family trying to contact her, as they've threatened her with many forms of torture in the past. This story doesn't have a slam dunk ending. I have my sisters, and they're in a safe environment where they'll get to grow up as kids. Amy is getting the help she needs and is slowly making her way out of tower. She built to protect herself in the only way she could, but she knows there isn't a rush to come out. I'll work with her at the pace she sets. She's still discovering her own interests, but quite like just reading a book with a form of fruity tea. She also has a small collection of stuffed animals, mostly Build-A-Bear, that she adores and takes one with her everywhere. She's sensitive to texture, so the feeling is a comfort for her. And once a week we sit down and try to find older bears she likes. We only have 3 Build-A-Bears on our wish list, and honestly, I've loved helping Amy discover herself. She lost a lot of her ability to think and feel for herself during this time, and watching her find her favorite book genre or her favorite types of music is a great feeling. Knowing how far she's come, and I live for the days she actually manages a smile. Some extra notes. Amy was pulled out of school at 10, a few months after I left home. She was kept isolated in her room and had very little meaningful contact. Also, I'm not going to share a photo of Lick ID Split, as she is a very recognizable dog, and not everyone who has contact with Amy and her dog know the full story, so I'd rather not draw in links between this story and her real day-to-day life, as she struggles with it enough. Answering the commonly asked questions to save myself repeating. Yes, I was groomed to, but much differently. I was taught I could treat the woman in my family how I wanted, but I was never really a violent person and sexually driven. I was a jerk, and although I have anger issues at times, taking it out on other people is not something I ever saw effective. My focuses were more on my study. Some of the other men in my family were the same and were never really abusive. Unfortunately, it never really clicked in my head that if I was being taught that, what were they teaching my sisters behind my back? I blame myself fully because of how long Amy suffered and do my best to make amends for it by showing her love no one else cared to do. I am in therapy too. I work closely with my Amy's therapist too, so don't worry about my mental well-being. I'm looking after me too. And for those mentioning BS, because I didn't go into detail about all the legal detail, I would go days on just a few hours of sleep during the whole legal battle, because I would be looking into every detail I could to know how to help my sisters. Most of it is a messy blur. I also didn't feel many people would care to listen, and I had to chop loads out of my story, and still had people saying it was too long. The story is unbelievable. I get that. I wouldn't want to believe it either. You don't need to say it though, just downvote and move along. I don't care what you choose to believe. Amy was pulled out under the premise that she was being homeschooled. I'm not sure how it worked from there. I was never homeschooled, and I didn't homeschool the girls. I'm not sure how my family got around DOCs or anything like that. I just know it worked for 6 years. Let's hear from the comment section. Comment 1. Man, you definitely wasn't the asshole at this story. You just want the best for your little sisters. And I think your mother is wide late for that. Comment 2. I've worked with a lot of at-risk youth. The number 1 rule of working with any children is that their safety and needs come before any adult's wants. I had to reread, but I don't think your mom is actually sorry. I actually think your family have been split into 3 camps. 1, those who have been in therapy and realize how fucked up everything was. 2, those that think nothing was fucked up. And 3, those who recognize that things were fucked up, but are angry that you changed the family dynamic. They want to punish you for unending the family dynamic. They might take the right actions to correct the fucked up stuff, but their hearts haven't caught up. They realize that things were fucked, but instead of taking out their anger on the actual predators, they're taking out their anger on the person who called out all the fuckery. If that makes sense. I think your mom is in category 3. She might be remorseful, but she's saying she has a right to her daughters makes me think she sees them as property and not kids in need of protection. I get that she had a fucked up life, but that's not an excuse for allowing her kids to be systematically abused. It sounds to me that she's excusing her actions instead of owning them and working like hell to make things right. Someone who is trying to make things right would go to therapy to understand how much they failed as a parent. Then they would try to slowly rebuild a relationship with their kids. But instead, she demands and says that she has rights to kids she allowed to be systematically abused. The cynic in me thinks that she's not getting divorced, and this is just a ploy to get them back under her care, so they could be abused again. Big picture, mom is not a safe person for your sisters to be around. Even if she is 100% better, I would bet that just seeing her would set back a lot of the progress that your sisters have made. Comment 3. Give mother a specific task that's repeatable to prove she's regretful and dedicated to apology. Not saying you need to act on it or share them, but tell her she can write the girls letters, say 1 per month, and send them to a P.O. box that you set up so that the girls aren't exposed to them. Maybe even to a separate email address instead to make it easier on you in terms of collection if she's computer savvy, so she doesn't get her hopes up. Be clear with her that the girls will likely never see these letters. But if she shows a real dedication and commitment to the process, maybe it can eventually give you the confidence to ask the girls if they'd like access to the letters. Maybe you also tell her that each letter needs to have an update on what she's done personally to try to dissuade others in your extended family from harassing you and the girls as you describe. Her lifetime of silence has bought her a sentence of being actively vocal against this behavior within your family on behalf of the girl for the rest of her life. This set of actions is more than enough to show a pattern of real, verifiable remorse if she sticks to it. Trouble with remorseful narcissists, though, is that they don't want the victim to feel better. They want to be forgiven of their own guilt. As a result, they will likely lose interest in the task after a few attempts without their own gratification satisfied, or, even worse, start to turn violent and resentful in the letters, which of course is why you aren't having the letters sent directly to the girls or to your shared home. Great sacrifice you've made on their behalf. Can't be easy as a young man in a house with 2 adolescent girls and the normal complications that brings plus the aspect of severe abuse. All that said, and it's not fair to put more burden on you, but you should really work to curb the emotional outbursts and throwing objects that you describe. Again, none of us can know the stress on your daily life, but these girls likely feel the anger in your actions 10 times as hard as you're delivering it after they've lived lives of constant abuse. I hope you get to see them both step out into the world one day as confident women who feel safe where they live thanks to your extremely hard work. Comment 4. Hearing your whole story is just, wow. I still can't believe a mother or father would ever let that happen to their children. I sincerely hope all the best for Amy's recovery and wish you the best of luck with everything you would have to do to keep them. As I know from a friend's story, it can be difficult for a man to stay in custody of a mentally unstable rape victim, but I'm glad she trusts you and you're giving both those girls everything they deserve. Now, for our second story. You will date my daughter, or I'll get you fired. So for some context, I'm a 17-year-old male, and I work at a Segway tour company. It's actually really fun. I get to ride Segways around the city and talk to people and get paid to do it. Plus the tipping isn't bad. So anyway, there was a tour booked a couple of days ago, and I came in about 20 minutes early to answer emails and get everything ready. The group shows up, mother and daughter, and that's when things get interesting. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by telling you what EP and me stand for, but D equals daughter and FBI equals Federal Bureau of Investigation, just for some useful info. EP and D come in, and I check them in. Me, all right, I have some waivers for you to sign. D, how old are you? D, says, me. Okay, then you don't need to sign a waiver. I ask this because if kids are younger than 18, their parents sign the waivers for them, but EP only heard me say the first part, not when I said D didn't need to sign a waiver, so she thought I was just asking her daughter how old she was. This was probably what started it all. We go on the tour, and while I'm giving my spiel, EP keeps interrupting me to tell me stuff about D and find if we are compatible. Me, And so this nonprofit organization opened in. EP, are you in college? Me. Haha, no. I'm a junior in high school. I'm usually pretty free with info about myself on tours because it helps keep people relaxed and initiates conversations during lulls in the tour. Plus it helps with tipping. Winky face. EP. Oh, D is also a junior. She's an artist. Stuff like this keeps happening throughout the tour, and every time, D gets redder and redder. My mom does this too, where she just tells random mall attendants about me. So I know what D is going through, and I feel her pain. At the end of the tour, I tell the two of them that they have 15 minutes to go around the town, and then they can meet me back at the Segway place. I get back and start getting things set up for their return. They roll in, pardon the pun, and I take their Segways to start charging them. EP, so what do you think of my daughter? Me, pardon me, what? EP, I saw you checking her out during the tour. Are you going to ask her out? D, mom, stop. Me, ma'am, I just recently got out of a relationship, and I'm really not looking for anything right now. EP, what? Me, huh? EP, is my daughter not good enough for you? Me, no, that's not it. I just said that I just got out of a relation. EP, you're gonna date my daughter, and that's final. Me, you can't tell me what to do. I'm not your kid, and if I don't want to date your daughter, I don't have to. Besides, you haven't even asked her if she wants to date me. D, yeah, I don't want to date him. Me, C, EP, I'm gonna call your boss and tell him about your terrible customer service. You're never going to work in city name again. Me, pulling out my phone. All right, you want to call him and explain the situation? How you're trying to force me to date your daughter and get me fired for saying no. Then I guess the absurdity of the situation finally sunk in, and her face transitioned from pure rage to slight confusion. EP, wait, maybe I don't want to. Me, no, let's call him. Start to go through my contacts and press my boss's name. Let's have this conversation. EP, I don't think that's a good idea. Phone starts ringing. EP, D, let's go. EP runs out the door. D turns to me and says, I'm sorry, and then follows her mom. I hang up the phone before my boss answers and start cleaning the Segways. I have some more stories from my work. You all tell me if you want to hear more. Let's hear from the comment section. Comment 1. So did the FBI get involved at all? Comment 2. Yeah, when the FBI was mentioned after you said that you worked for a Segway company, I was settling in for something pretty dramatic. Comment 3. You should have when the call go through and warned your boss about the EP and the D who didn't sign the waiver in case they try anything funny. And by funny, I mean disgusting, illegal behavior.